Hey everybody, welcome back to Family Friday. I'm George Willett, the Youth and Family Minister here at the Westport Christian Church. Listen, I know I have been gone for a month and a half. We just kind of took a hiatus, unintentional. We're very sorry. So what I'm doing is I'm going back and reviewing some stuff we had talked about before the summer crazy season hit. And what we're doing is we're reviewing this book by George Barna in Arizona Christian University. It was all about the worldview of American adults. So this is a review of the second part I did. I just want to catch us all up before we go forward. So here it is. What is a worldview? When we're talking about this question, here's how all the adults in this country think. What we're talking about is your worldview is how you actually see the things around you. You perceive and experience the world that you're interacting with. It's how you interpret all this stuff, and it's how you actually live. It's how you're responding to the world around you, how you think about the world. It's this kind of stuff. It's a worldview is how you decide what right and wrong really are. Your worldview tells you what matters, what's important in the world and in your life. A worldview answers those basic fundamental questions of why does anything exist at all? Why is there something rather than nothing? What makes up the good life? What does happiness mean? What does beauty mean? There's just all these different ways of seeing the world around us. And it also answers some really big questions such as, what happens when we die? I mean, is that the end? You die, you're dead, your consciousness is no more? Or is there something after our physical death that we experience in our consciousness in what Christians would call as our soul? So I hope you see that this conversation is really, really important because worldview will affect how we live. We looked last time, and we're going to do it again today, that this was the results that came out of this study in 2021 that George Barna and Arizona Christian University did. That said when they did this survey of American adults, 18 and older, that 2% kind of fell into this category of secular humanism, 1% in moralistic therapeutic deism and postmodernism and nihilism, less than 0.5% for Eastern mysticism and Marxism, and then only 6% of the American population had what's called a biblical worldview. Now, as you see, that doesn't add up anywhere close to 100%. So what they found when they went through these questions that they asked is that most people in America wind up having this worldview that's called syncretism. It's where you're taking a little bit of this worldview and a little bit of that worldview, and you're creating your own way of seeing the world. It's very individualistic. It's very much what you like is what you like, what I like is what I like. And I think when we stop and we look at the world around us, we look at the state of America today, this makes a lot of sense. This idea that all of us in this country, to a great majority, are not seeing things the same way as everybody else. And even this 88% of people who hold on to syncretism, they're trying to figure this out by bringing everything together, they don't see it the same because they're all pulling different parts of different things to make their own personal worldview. Having a personal worldview will not work to bring unity or understanding or even be able to have good, fruitful conversations. This is why this study, this conversation is so important. The church has got to understand who we are, and the fact is that most likely, even in our churches, only a minority of people in our churches have a biblical worldview. So they did more research too, and they said, okay, so those were the people that held those views. And here are by answering these questions, these are people that lean a certain way. They don't answer the questions clearly enough to say they definitely have this kind of a worldview, but taken together, this is more how they operate. And when they do that, 39% of the people who responded lean towards a worldview called moralistic therapeutic deism. Now, we're going to get into probably each one of these and tell you how Barna defines them, kind of what they look like when you look at the research and everything else. But 39% of the population, a majority of the American adult population, falls into that worldview as where they lean. Biblical worldview was 31%. Secular humanism, 16%. Postmodernism, 16%. Nihilism, depends on how you want to pronounce it, 10%. Eastern mysticism, 10%. And Marxism, 10%. This is pretty shocking when you think about what that means. And again, look at the world around us. Look at the state of America. As a group of people, as a country, we're just not having the same conversations. We're not agreeing with each other. We don't see things the same way. And because we don't understand this, we end up fighting a lot more instead of trying to communicate better. Instead of trying to explain my point of view, I just kind of default into, everyone is going to understand me and think like me, and if they don't, then automatically they're against me. And, people will live that way, but we won't do well at having conversations that bring unity back, or at least get people to think about their worldview. Is that consistent? Is that a correct worldview? And that's ultimately what we're going to do, is have conversations. So here's some research I had done. And again, think about this. A person's worldview begins to develop between the ages of 13 to 18 months. You're hitting that year age between year 1 and 2. Babies start to experience the world in a different way. From birth to about a year old, the kind of universe kind of revolves around them. They're very unaware of people kind of existing when they're not in their presence. It's called object permanence, that if something's out of sight, it's out of mind. So all of a sudden they start realizing there are people that take care of me. There are people that I can depend on and count on. When I cry, they come. When I'm hungry, they feed me. When I need to be changed, they change me and bathe me. And all these things, just talking to babies and singing to them and playing with them, helps them begin to understand the world around them. And it happens really young. By the time a child is about 13, a worldview is pretty developed. They're already kind of locked into how they're going to see the world around them. How we as family and as friends and adults that are interacting with kids, how we treat them, what we tell them, and how we live our lives helps to lock in their worldview. If we don't realize, especially in the church, if we don't realize how important it is to get children engaged in the church, the life of the church, not keep sending them away and having these little classrooms where they have a lot of fun, but they actually participate in worship. They sing with us. They watch as we take communion. They watch as people are baptized. They see the sermons and listen to the sermons being preached. Don't be surprised when their worldview doesn't involve church as a part of their life. Here's what the Bible says. Listen, people of Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is the only God. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Always remember these commands that I give to you today. Be sure to teach them to your children. Talk about these commands when you sit in your house, when you walk on the road. Talk about them when you lie down and when you get up. This is part of that first section is what's called the Shema. It's this famous prayer for the nation of Israel. And they would pray this every day, and they would remember who God is and who they're called to be in this relationship with God. And that He has commanded us to teach our children. You'll find out next time when we talk a little bit about this book, one of the things that George Barna says is that in America, worldview is caught, not taught. Like, we don't intentionally train our children. It just kind of happens by culture, by friends and peer groups, schools, movies, music, entertainment. That's a horrible way of teaching a worldview, that they just kind of absorb what's around them. I mean, if they're living in a Christian family and they're getting good Christian teaching, that would be wonderful to just kind of have them absorb that. But if we don't sit down and talk with our kids and train them and teach them and make it a part of our everyday life, again, don't be surprised when faith isn't a part of their life. In Ephesians, this is in the New Testament too, because Paul says when he's talking about families and how families should interact, fathers, don't make your children angry, but raise them with the kind of teaching and training you learn from the Lord. Helping our children to develop a worldview, a biblical worldview, is one of the absolute most essential, important things we're ever going to do as parents and as a church family. So please understand this conversation we're having, this book that I'm looking at. I research this, I look at a lot of this stuff, and I go over it, and I go to a lot of conferences because the church has got to step up. We've got to help families understand the importance of discipleship in their homes. We've got to equip them, encourage them, empower them, and support them. And then in the church gathering, we've got to involve children. We've got to be involved in teaching and training them. Because if not, then we shouldn't be surprised when kids get to this age of accountability, this age of understanding, when they're responsible for themselves, that by and large, the majority of kids, I think the last numbers I saw were around 75 to 77% of Christian kids raised in a Christian family, leave the church within 2 years of leaving our homes. That told me that the church, by and large, is not doing a very good job. So I'm interested in this stuff, and I hope you are too. I hope you see, as a believer, why this is an important conversation to have. So again, that was just a review of that part 2 that we had done so many months ago. Come back, we'll do a review of 3, and then we're going to hit, probably what I'll do is go through each of those worldviews, talk about what they are, what each one of them means, and then I'll give us some of the questions that are in the book that Barna used to assess what the worldview of adults is in this country. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope to see you again next week. God bless. Goodbye.